The steady hum of the city's evening rush was broken by a faint voice. The sun was slipping behind the skyline, casting a warm glow over the crowded streets, where people moved with purpose, too lost in their own worlds to notice much around them. Isaiah, a young black boy with dust-streaked cheeks and an outstretched hand, stood on the corner quietly. By now he knew not to expect much, maybe a few coins, maybe a bit of leftover food. He'd long since taught himself to ignore the hunger gnawing at him and the cold glances that often followed him. His makeshift bed, just a worn piece of cardboard, was tucked under his arm as he wove through the crowd, almost invisible. His voice was hoarse from calling out all day, and each passing minute chipped away a little more of his spirit. As he scanned the faces around him, he noticed a well-dressed woman, her clothes gleaming in the fading light. Rings glittered on her fingers as she adjusted her purse, and Isaiah felt a tiny flicker of hope. "Please, ma'am?" he murmured, stepping forward with open hands. "Just a few coins for food. I haven't eaten in days." The woman looked at him with something close to disgust, her face twisting as if his presence alone soured her evening. She pulled away sharply. "Don't touch me, you filthy thing," she snapped. "This coat costs more than you'll see in a lifetime." Isaiah's shoulders slumped, but he didn't step back. His hands shook a bit, but he stood his ground. "Please," he whispered, "I can work, clean your car. Anything, just a little food." But his words only fueled her disdain. She raised her voice, her tone dripping with scorn. "Work? Look at you, dirty, probably crawling with lice. People like you just want to beg and steal from decent folks like me." She sneered, and by then others had stopped to watch, a few even pulling out their phones. Isaiah's heart pounded, his hand moving over his empty stomach out of habit, but he fought to keep his head up. He looked around at the faces around him, eyes filled with shame but refusing to bow. "You don't know me," he said softly, his voice carrying a strength he hadn't known he had. "You don't know why I'm here or what I've been through." The woman's gaze hardened, her words sharp and cutting. "Bet you tried to rob me. Kids like you're all the same. Probably part of some gang." Isaiah felt his cheeks heat, blinking fast to hold back tears. But her words seemed to strike through the thin armor he'd managed to build around himself. Just then, a deep voice rang out from the crowd. "That's enough." Isaiah looked up, and so did the crowd, turning toward the source of the voice. A tall man stood there, dressed sharply, his face calm but intense. The woman hesitated, flustered by his sudden intervention. "I was just trying to teach him a lesson. These beggars need to know their place," she mumbled, looking away. The man ignored her, stepping toward Isaiah with a gaze that softened as he took in the boy's worn appearance. He reached into his pocket and handed Isaiah a folded bill. Isaiah's eyes widened. It was more money than he'd ever held. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice barely audible. The man nodded, casting one last piercing look at the woman that left her speechless. "Today you've shown everyone who you really are," he said quietly, before turning back to Isaiah with a gentle smile. "Take care of yourself," he murmured, disappearing back into the crowd. But as Isaiah watched him leave, something shifted within him, a small spark of hope he hadn't felt in a long time. That night, Isaiah found a spot beneath a bridge, clutching the bill tightly. The man's kindness had stirred something in him, filling him with a mix of fear, hope, and anticipation he wasn't used to. As dawn broke, Isaiah rose, his mind buzzing with new thoughts. For the first time, he was thinking of something beyond mere survival. Later, as he passed a bakery, he saw people coming and going with pastries and bread, the warm aroma nearly overwhelming. Just as he was about to step inside, a voice behind him hissed, "Don't even think about it." Isaiah turned to see another street kid, about his age, wearing a torn coat and watching him with wary eyes. "Who are you?" Isaiah asked, startled. The girl crossed her arms. "Name's Tasha. And if you know what's good for you, you'll stay away from places like this." Isaiah frowned. "I was just going to buy something to eat," Tasha scoffed, "and not here you won't. These fancy places call the cops as soon as they spot someone like us." She looked him up and down. "You must be new to this." Isaiah hesitated, glancing away. "I've been out here a minute, if that's what you're asking." Tasha gave a small shake of her head. "Nah. I mean, you're still figuring it out," she said, nodding at the money crumpled in his fist. Someone hands you a fat bill and you think you can just stroll up to a bakery like they're not gonna notice? It doesn't work that way. Isaiah's cheeks burned with a mix of embarrassment and frustration. Tasha wasn't wrong, though. He'd been so eager he hadn't even thought about how others would see him. She softened, pointing down the street. There's a food cart a few blocks down. They won't ask questions. Come on. They wove through the back alley, slipping through narrow paths until they reached a quiet stretch with a lone food cart serving simple sandwiches. Isaiah ordered one, and they found a spot by a small fountain. Between bites, he glanced at Tasha. "Why'd you help me?" She shrugged, chewing slowly. "Someone helped me once. Figured I'd pass it on. But don't get comfortable. People out here, they'll smile one minute, take what's yours the next." Isaiah absorbed her words, letting the weight of them settle. "So what should I do?" She gave him a hard look. "You make a plan. You lay low, stay sharp, and find a way out of this mess." She glanced up at the sky as clouds began to drift in. "This life isn't for anyone. But if you're here, you learn quick." Something stirred in Isaiah, a resolve he hadn't felt before. That day, Tasha showed him where he could find alley shortcuts, friendly shopkeepers, and hidden corners where no one would disturb him. As they walked, Isaiah's mind drifted back to the stranger who'd given him the cash. His face now etched in Isaiah's memory, a small reminder that kindness could still exist out here. One evening, while waiting for Tasha near the park, Isaiah spotted a familiar figure in the crowd, a man in a tailored suit walking briskly. It was him. Isaiah's heart raced, torn between staying hidden or approaching. Then he saw Tasha lurking close by, her gaze fixed on the man, her hand slipping inside her coat. The glint of a small blade caught his eye. Without thinking, Isaiah lunged forward, grabbing her arm. "Tasha, no." Tasha whipped around, startled. Isaiah released her. "We could take his wallet and live easy for a while." Isaiah shook his head firm. "This isn't right. He's decent. He helped me." Tasha stared at him in disbelief. Then with a sigh, she slid the knife back in her coat. "Fine. But don't think people like him are going to keep you safe." As Tasha stalked off, Isaiah felt a mixture of guilt and relief. He turned back and was surprised to see the man watching him, calm but curious. "You okay?" the man asked, his tone gentle. Isaiah nodded, though his voice shook. "Yeah, just passing by." The man extended a hand. "Simon," he said. "And you are?" "Isaiah," he replied, taking his hand. Simon's expression softened. "I've been looking for you, Isaiah. Wanted to check you were all right." Isaiah's heart skipped a beat. No one had ever looked for him before, let alone someone like Simon. But before he could reply, a sleek black car rolled up, and a woman with cold, piercing eyes lowered the window, her voice sharp. "There you are, Simon. Finished with your little excursion." Simon's face tensed, but his tone remained level. "Just talking to a friend, Amelia." She shot a disapproving look at Isaiah, disdain clear in her gaze. "Friend? I don't see why you waste your time with people like him." Isaiah felt a pang of shame but stood his ground. Simon turned to her, voice steady but with an edge. "Enough, Amelia?" Then he looked back at Isaiah, a quiet apology in his eyes. "Sorry about that." Isaiah managed a faint smile. "It's all good. Thanks for everything." Simon nodded, a silent promise lingering between them, then climbed into the car. As they drove off, Isaiah stood alone in the dim light, Amelia's cold look still stinging, yet Simon's kindness sparking something new, a sense that maybe he wasn't invisible after all. In the days that followed, Isaiah's thoughts kept drifting back to Simon and to the look he'd seen in Amelia's eyes, something deeper than annoyance, a hint of anger. One evening, as he shared a stale sandwich with Tasha by the fountain, she noticed his distant gaze. "What's got you all in your head?" she asked. He hesitated, searching for the right words. "You ever feel like you're meant for more than this?" he finally asked, voice low. Tasha let out a dry laugh, the bitterness evident. "Getting by here, that's all we really aim for," she said, her eyes narrowing as she looked him over. "But ever since that stranger showed up, you're acting off. You think he's your ticket out." Isaiah's gaze shifted, a bit embarrassed. "It's not like that. I think he's in trouble." Tasha scoffed. Guys like him don't need a thing from people like us. But Isaiah couldn't shake the sense that Simon's world held shadows unseen and that somehow Amelia was tangled in it. The next day, Isaiah found himself wandering through the fancy part of town, searching for Simon's familiar face. Hours ticked by before he finally saw him, worn and tired, stepping out of a sleek office building. Summoning his courage, Isaiah walked over and softly called out, "Simon." Simon turned, his expression shifting to one of surprise. "Isaiah, what are you doing here?" Isaiah hesitated, searching for words. "I just wanted to see if you were okay." A hint of softness entered Simon's gaze, and he gestured to a quiet bench in a nearby park. "You're a sharp kid, Isaiah," he started, a weight to his voice. "There's a lot going on. Things I can't ignore anymore." He lowered his voice to a near whisper, adding, "I think Amelia is trying to take over everything I have. All I am. I'm stuck." Isaiah's stomach nodded, sympathy threading through his voice. "Why don't you just leave?" Simon's eyes darkened. "It's not that simple. She's in everything I own and every piece of my life. I think she's even been trying to poison me. Anytime I eat her cooking, I feel terrible." Isaiah felt a chill run through him, his earlier instincts solidifying. "Simon, you have to get away from her." Simon looked down, voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I can." Isaiah straightened, resolve in his voice. "I'll help you." Simon studied him, a faint glimmer of hope lighting his face. "Why would you do that?" Isaiah met his gaze, steady and sure. "Because you gave me a chance. And everyone deserves a shot at freedom." In the days that followed, Isaiah confided in Tasha, who, though hesitant, agreed to help. They began watching Amelia, noting her patterns and who she met with. One evening, Tasha overheard her talking with a man at a cafe, whispering about plans to claim Simon's assets. Relaying this to Isaiah, they both knew they had to act fast. The next night, they followed her to a sprawling mansion on the city's edge. Sneaking inside, they found her hunched over a desk in a study. Papers spread in front of her, discussing her schemes on the phone. Isaiah and Tasha quickly snapped photos, slipping out before Amelia noticed. The following morning, Isaiah handed Simon the photos, heart pounding. This is the proof you need?" Simon's face paled as he scanned the papers, eyes wide. "Isaiah, you've saved me." But there was one more step, and Simon asked Isaiah to stand by him during his confrontation with Amelia. That evening, they returned to Simon's mansion, the air thick with tension as they waited. Finally, Amelia appeared, her face hardening when she saw Isaiah. "What is he doing here?" she sneered. Simon held up the documents, voice steady. "We know everything, Amelia. Your lies, your plans. It's all here." Fury distorted her face as she scoffed. "And who's going to believe a street kid like him?" Her eyes darted toward Isaiah, cold and dismissive. "You don't belong here." Isaiah met her gaze without flinching. "Maybe not. But you're the one who betrayed him." In a flash, she lunged at Simon, but Isaiah moved between them, catching her arm. Her face twisted, and she shoved him to the ground, but the sound of footsteps filled the room as police officers entered, called by Simon earlier. Amelia's face went white as the officers approached, her gaze lingering bitterly on Isaiah as they led her away. When they were finally alone, Simon turned to Isaiah, gratitude in his eyes. "I couldn't have done this without you." Isaiah managed to smile, the weight of his past easing. "You helped me first. I just returned the favor." Simon's expression softened. "If you're willing, I'd like to help you find a new path, a fresh start." Isaiah felt hope rising inside, something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Nodding, he replied, "I'd like that." As they left the mansion, the cool night air felt freeing against Isaiah's face, each breath brimming with possibility. He'd walk through darkness and come out stronger, ready now to step into the light.